Rain hammered the streets of Chicago that Thursday night like fists against rusted metal. Sirens echoed across the south side while neon liquor signs flickered through sheets of cold mist. Inside a cramped apartment above an old pawn shop, 12-year-old Elijah Carter sat beside a broken window holding a baseball glove older than he was. The glove smelled like leather oil, sweat, and memories nobody discussed anymore. Two faded letters rested near the thumb, DC. Elijah traced them carefully every night before sleeping. He never asked his mother about those initials because her face always darkened whenever baseball entered the conversation. 3 blocks away, men crowded into Rico's bar, shouting at televisions mounted above cracked mirrors. Every screen showed the same smiling face. Marcus Holloway, former World Series champion, American sports legend, owner of the prestigious Holloway Elite Baseball Academy outside downtown Chicago. Marcus stood behind polished microphones announcing his newest youth showcase tournament. Cameras flashed while wealthy sponsors applauded his speech about opportunity and discipline. He spoke confidently about building character through baseball and creating pathways for America's forgotten children. Nobody in Elijah's neighborhood believed those words anymore. At 6 every morning, Elijah trained behind Dawson's repair garage with Walter Dawson, a retired catcher carrying 40 years of disappointment inside his crooked spine. Walter's batting cage leaned sideways beside railroad tracks and smelled like dust, gasoline, and wet concrete. The neighborhood called it the graveyard because forgotten dreams went there to rot. Walter never allowed excuses. Every throw demanded precision, every movement carried purpose. Elijah learned baseball the hard way. No expensive coaches, no advanced technology. Only repetition, bruised fingers, and discipline carved from exhaustion. That Friday morning, Walter hung 3 rusted cans from the batting cage ceiling. Fog drifted through the alley while trains screamed somewhere beyond abandoned warehouses. Elijah stood silently inside the cage, wearing faded jeans and a gray sweatshirt despite the summer humidity. 3 throws, Walter said quietly. Elijah nodded once. First throw. The baseball exploded through the center can. Second throw. The next can spun violently against the fence. Third throw. The final can ripped free completely and disappeared into the darkness behind the cage. Walter stared silently while neighborhood kids gathered outside the fence, whispering nervously. One teenager crossed himself like he had witnessed something supernatural. Elijah lowered his arms slowly. No celebration, no smile. Walter opened his weathered notebook, filled with years of handwritten numbers and scouting observations. He circled something heavily before closing it again. Then he looked directly at Elijah. "Your father threw exactly like that," he whispered. Elijah froze. Nobody had spoken about his father in almost 8 years. Elijah barely slept after Walter mentioned his father. Rain tapped softly against the apartment windows while distant traffic hummed through the sleeping city. His mother moved quietly around the kitchen, preparing for another overnight nursing shift at Mercy General Hospital. She looked exhausted before sunrise even arrived. Elijah sat at the small kitchen table, turning the old glove carefully beneath yellow overhead light. The faded initials seemed heavier now. DC. Questions pressed against his chest until silence became impossible. "Who was he?" Elijah finally asked. His mother stopped pouring coffee. For several seconds, only the refrigerator motor made noise inside the apartment. Her shoulders tightened slowly beneath wrinkled blue scrubs. "Your father was named Daniel Carter," she answered quietly, "and baseball destroyed him." She grabbed her hospital bag quickly afterward and left before Elijah could ask another question. Outside, clouds swallowed most of the morning sky, while heat rose from wet pavement like smoke. Elijah carried those words with him all the way to Walter's batting cage. Walter already waited beside the pitching machine, drinking black coffee from a stained metal thermos. His knees cracked loudly whenever he moved now. Age had turned his body stiff, but his eyes still noticed everything. "She told you," Walter said immediately. Elijah nodded. Walter sighed deeply before motioning toward 2 old folding chairs near the fence. Freight trains rattled nearby, while pigeons gathered across telephone wires overhead. "Your father should have played professional baseball for 15 years, Walter began. "Best left-handed pitcher I ever caught behind. Strong arm, brilliant instincts, fearless." Elijah listened without blinking. Then he started speaking publicly about things powerful people wanted hidden: racism, corrupt scouting practices, coaches stealing opportunities from poor kids. Daniel embarrassed wealthy executives who built careers pretending equality already existed. Walter rubbed tired hands across his face. After that, teams stopped calling, reporters stopped writing, friends disappeared. Baseball erased him slowly. The batting cage suddenly felt colder despite the heat. "How did he die?" Elijah asked. Walter looked away toward passing trains. "Heart failure officially," he muttered. "But truthfully, disappointment killed him first." Elijah gripped the glove tightly until cracked leather pressed against his skin. Later that afternoon, flyers appeared across Chicago announcing Marcus Holloway's massive youth showcase event. Every talented player in Illinois planned attending. Scouts from colleges and development programs would watch closely. At the bottom, bold letters promised opportunity for every young athlete. Walter read the flyer 3 times silently. His hands trembled afterward. "This could change your life," he whispered. Elijah studied Marcus Holloway's smiling photograph printed near the top. Wealthy, confident, untouchable. Then he folded the flyer carefully and slipped it into his pocket. Across downtown Chicago, Marcus Holloway stood inside his luxury office overlooking Lake Michigan while reviewing showcase registrations with his staff. An assistant handed him Elijah's application. Marcus glanced briefly at the South Side address, then he smirked. "Rejected," he said coldly. But 30 seconds later, Marcus changed his mind. "Actually," he added quietly, "let the kid come." Sometimes audiences enjoy watching impossible dreams collapse publicly. Saturday morning arrived, wrapped in heavy gray clouds and sticky summer heat. Chicago smelled like wet asphalt, gasoline, and lake water drifting through crowded streets. Elijah boarded the downtown bus alone, carrying his father's glove inside a worn backpack. 45 minutes later, the city changed. Glass towers replaced abandoned buildings. Expensive restaurants lined spotless sidewalks. Luxury SUVs filled parking lots outside Holloway Elite Academy like polished monuments to wealth. Elijah stepped off the bus wearing faded sneakers with cracked soles and jeans slightly too short at the ankles. Parents nearby stared briefly before returning attention toward their children dressed in custom uniforms worth more than Elijah's monthly grocery bill. Inside the academy, everything gleamed. Bright indoor fields stretched beneath massive lights. Digital screens displayed player statistics beside sponsor advertisements. Coaches carried tablets while young athletes warmed up in coordinated drills supervised by private trainers. Elijah moved carefully through the crowd, feeling every eye measure him. At the registration table, a blonde woman scanned his application without smiling. "Registration fee is $200, she said flatly. Elijah blinked. Walter never mentioned money. "I don't have that," Elijah admitted quietly. "I just came to throw." Families waiting nearby exchanged uncomfortable glances. One teenage player laughed openly. "Maybe he thought this was public park baseball," the boy muttered loudly. Several parents chuckled. Elijah felt heat rise into his face, but he remained still. Then another voice cut sharply across the facility. "What exactly is happening here?" The room shifted instantly. Marcus Holloway approached wearing an expensive training jacket embroidered with championship logos. Cameras followed him constantly now, even inside his own building. His smile vanished immediately after seeing Elijah. Marcus looked him over slowly. Old shoes, cheap clothes, South Side address. The judgment arrived before conversation ever began. "Who approved this registration?" Marcus demanded. The blonde employee lowered her eyes nervously. "He says he only wants a chance to pitch," she explained. Marcus laughed once beneath his breath. "A chance?" He stepped closer until Elijah could smell expensive cologne beneath the cold air conditioning. "Listen carefully," Marcus said quietly enough for nearby families to lean forward listening. "This academy develops elite athletes. Discipline matters here. Presentation matters here. You cannot wander inside looking homeless and expect serious people to waste time pretending otherwise." Silence spread across the field. Marcus pointed toward Elijah's glove. "That thing belongs in a museum or garbage can. Honestly, which one came first?" Several boys laughed harder now. Elijah's jaw tightened. Marcus continued casually, almost enjoying himself. Kids from neighborhoods like yours always believe talent alone changes everything. Life doesn't work that way. Baseball definitely doesn't. Those words landed harder than shouting ever could. A security guard appeared beside Elijah. "Come on, kid," the man said awkwardly. Elijah still didn't move. Something inside him shifted quietly beneath years of silence and grief. Marcus turned away, already dismissing him completely. Then Elijah finally spoke. His voice remained calm. "I could strike you out in 3 pitches," he said. The academy froze. Marcus stopped walking. Slowly, he turned back around. Elijah looked directly into his eyes. 3 pitches, Elijah repeated. "You won't touch one." For 2 full seconds, nobody inside Holloway Elite Academy made a sound. Then laughter erupted everywhere. Parents laughed first, coaches followed immediately afterward. Teenage players bent forward, holding their stomachs, while cameras captured everything from multiple angles. Marcus Holloway smiled broadly now, completely entertained. 3 pitches, he repeated loudly. "Kid, I spent 17 years hitting against Hall of Fame pitchers. You think some skinny middle schooler from the South Side scares me?" Elijah never looked away. "I didn't say scare," he answered calmly. "I said strike out." That response quieted several people unexpectedly. Marcus studied him again more carefully this time. The boy's eyes carried something unusual, not arrogance, not desperation, certainty. Marcus hated certainty in people beneath him. "What's your name?" he asked sharply. "Elijah Carter." The name meant nothing yet. Marcus grabbed a baseball from a nearby bucket and tossed it lazily toward Elijah. The ball smacked against his chest before dropping onto artificial turf. "Fine," Marcus announced dramatically. "Give everyone a show." 1 pitch. Phones appeared instantly throughout the facility. Elijah bent down slowly and picked up the baseball. His fingers wrapped naturally across the seams like they belonged there permanently. Somewhere behind him, Walter Dawson entered the academy carrying an old duffel bag. He froze immediately after seeing cameras pointed toward the field. "Oh no," Walter whispered. Marcus stepped casually into the batting cage without helmet or gloves. "Let's see this legendary arm," he mocked. Elijah walked toward the temporary pitching mound while hundreds of eyes followed him. His heartbeat slowed strangely instead of accelerating. Noise faded around him until only the baseball remained real. Walter pushed through the crowd desperately. "Elijah!" he shouted, but the boy was already winding up. Smooth motion, balanced shoulders, explosive release. The baseball tore through the air faster than anyone expected from a 12-year-old arm. Marcus reacted late. Very late. The ball cracked violently into the catcher's mitt before Marcus completed his swing. Silence dropped across the academy. Digital radar equipment near the cage flashed instantly, 72 mph. A coach cursed quietly beneath his breath. Another coach checked the radar manually, believing equipment malfunctioned. Marcus stepped backward slowly, gripping the bat tighter now. That pitch translated dangerously close to professional velocity from adult distance. The laughter disappeared completely. Walter finally reached the cage, breathing heavily. "We're leaving," he ordered immediately. Marcus ignored him. His pride had already taken the bait. "Again," Marcus demanded. Walter's expression darkened. "No," he snapped. "1 pitch was enough." Marcus stared toward Elijah carefully. For the first time all morning, uncertainty flickered briefly across his face. Then his ego buried it immediately. "You got lucky," Marcus said coldly. Elijah picked up his backpack quietly. "That wasn't luck," he replied. The cameras captured every second, especially Marcus Holloway's expression. 3 hours later, the video reached social media. By midnight, 4 million people had watched a famous World Series champion swing helplessly beneath a Southside kid's fastball. And deep inside a luxury downtown penthouse, billionaire investor Victoria Sterling replayed the footage 7 times before making a single phone call. "Find me Walter Dawson," she ordered, immediately. Sunday morning transformed Chicago into a city arguing with itself. Sports radio stations replayed Marcus Holloway's missed swing every 15 minutes. Television analysts debated whether the radar gun malfunctioned. Social media exploded with slow-motion clips showing Elijah's impossible fastball ripping across the strike zone. The internet gave him a nickname before breakfast: Southside Ghost. Inside Mercy General Hospital, nurses crowded around phones watching the footage repeatedly, while Elijah's mother hurried through another exhausting shift. Some employees recognized her immediately after seeing Elijah's last name appear online. Questions followed her through every hallway. She answered none. Meanwhile, Walter Dawson sat alone inside his batting cage, listening to rain hammer the metal roof overhead. His weathered notebook remained open across the desk beside old newspaper clippings, hidden carefully for years. Every article mentioned the same name: Daniel Carter. At noon, a black luxury sedan stopped outside the cage. Victoria Sterling stepped out carrying no umbrella despite the rain. She wore a dark, tailored coat and moved with calm confidence sharpened through decades controlling powerful corporations. Walter recognized her instantly. Former Southside kid, now owner of Sterling Media Group, worth nearly $4 billion. "You found him," Victoria said quietly. Walter nodded once. Victoria walked inside the cage, slowly studying photographs hanging across cracked wooden walls. Young athletes, community teams, forgotten seasons. Then her eyes stopped on one faded picture. Daniel Carter smiling beside Walter after winning a regional championship 20 years earlier. Victoria inhaled sharply. "Dear God," she whispered. Walter handed her the notebook silently. Velocity numbers, accuracy percentages, training observations spanning 4 years. Victoria flipped pages faster as disbelief spread across her face. "These statistics are impossible for a 12-year-old, she muttered. Daniel was impossible too, Walter answered. Rain continued pounding overhead while freight trains screamed nearby through heavy fog. Finally, Victoria closed the notebook carefully. "Marcus Holloway publicly humiliated a child," she said. "Unfortunately for him, America witnessed it live." Walter leaned back slowly. "Marcus believes wealth protects him from consequences," he replied. Victoria smiled faintly. "Only until richer people disagree." That evening, Marcus Holloway appeared on national sports television attempting damage control. Expensive lighting softened his features while hosts praised his contributions to youth athletics. Marcus laughed dismissively whenever Elijah's challenge surfaced. "The kid threw one decent pitch," he said casually. "America loves fairy tales." Then the host asked carefully, "Would you ever face him publicly?" Marcus smirked confidently. "Against a middle schooler, please." Across Chicago, millions watched his answer, including Victoria Sterling. She muted the television and dialed another number immediately. "Prepare contracts," she instructed calmly. "One public exhibition. Elijah Carter versus Marcus Holloway. 3 pitches only." Her assistant hesitated. "What stakes are we offering?" Victoria stared toward rain sliding down penthouse windows 50 floors above downtown lights. Then she answered quietly, $100 million. The next morning, every major sports network in America received identical legal documents proposing the challenge officially. Marcus Holloway laughed when his lawyers first showed him. 10 minutes later, his smile disappeared, because attached beneath the contract sat another document. Daniel Carter's sealed professional scouting report, signed personally 20 years earlier by Marcus Holloway himself. Marcus Holloway locked himself inside his downtown office for nearly 2 hours after reading Daniel Carter's scouting report. Chicago stretched beneath his windows through cold gray afternoon haze while memories he buried years earlier slowly resurfaced. Daniel Carter, left-handed pitcher, explosive velocity, dangerous opinions. Marcus remembered him perfectly now. 20 years ago, Marcus still played professionally while preparing for retirement investments alongside influential team executives. Daniel embarrassed those executives publicly during contract negotiations involving minority players receiving smaller opportunities despite identical statistics. Marcus stayed silent back then. Silence protected careers. Now Daniel's son stood directly in front of him, carrying the same eyes, same arm motion, same impossible confidence. His phone buzzed constantly across the desk. Sponsors demanded statements. Sports commentators questioned his integrity. Former teammates privately advised accepting the challenge before public opinion worsened permanently. Marcus poured expensive bourbon into crystal glassware despite barely tasting it. Meanwhile, Elijah sat inside Walter's batting cage, listening quietly while Victoria Sterling explained the proposed exhibition event. Television crews already surrounded nearby streets hoping for interviews. Helicopters occasionally circled overhead like vultures observing history forming below. $100 million sounds insane, Victoria admitted calmly. That's why America cannot stop watching. Elijah remained focused only on the baseball resting inside his hand. I just want him standing in the batter's box, he said softly. Walter studied him carefully. This isn't backyard baseball anymore, Walter warned. Marcus Holloway built an empire protecting his reputation. Men like him become dangerous when embarrassed publicly. Elijah finally looked upward. Good, he answered. That single word unsettled everyone inside the cage. Later that night, Elijah's mother returned home, carrying grocery bags through crowded apartment stairs, while reporters shouted questions from sidewalks below. Neighbors peeked through doors, whispering excitedly. Inside the apartment, she found Elijah asleep beside the old glove. Television light flickered softly across his face. Every channel showed the same debate. Would Marcus Holloway accept? She sat quietly beside her son, brushing hair gently away from his forehead. Fear pressed heavily against her chest because she recognized something inside Elijah now. The same fire Daniel carried before baseball destroyed him. At 11:47 p.m., Marcus Holloway finally held a press conference. Cameras crowded aggressively around marble hallways inside Holloway Elite Academy. Reporters shouted over one another while national broadcasts interrupted scheduled programming live. Marcus stepped before microphones wearing a dark tailored suit. His expression remained composed carefully. I've spent my career supporting young athletes, he began smoothly. However, recent media narratives intentionally distort reality for entertainment. He paused deliberately. Therefore, I officially accept Elijah Carter's challenge. The room exploded instantly. Flashbulbs burst everywhere. Marcus raised one hand for silence. 3 pitches, he continued coldly. Public event. National broadcast. $100 million donated afterward toward youth development programs. A reporter shouted, "Why accept now?" Marcus smiled faintly. Because sometimes children need difficult lessons about humility. Across Chicago, Elijah watched the announcement quietly beside Walter and Victoria. Nobody celebrated. Walter simply closed his notebook slowly. Now the real work starts, he muttered. Then he opened a locked metal cabinet hidden beneath old equipment. Inside rested a faded baseball wrapped carefully inside black cloth. Walter handed it toward Elijah. Your father called this pitch the Phantom, he whispered, and nobody alive has ever hit it cleanly. Walter Dawson never discussed the Phantom pitch casually. For 4 years, he treated it like a loaded weapon, hidden beneath floorboards. Even mentioning the grip felt dangerous inside the cramped batting cage. Rain dripped steadily through holes in the rusted roof, while Elijah turned the faded baseball carefully inside his palm. Black marker lines covered the leather, showing finger placement unlike anything standard coaching manuals taught. Daniel created it accidentally, Walter explained quietly. Winter training, frozen fingers, wrong grip. The ball dropped so violently, his catcher thought wind pushed it downward. Victoria Sterling leaned against the cage fence, listening silently. Professional scouts saw it once, Walter continued. Afterward, several executives demanded Daniel stop throwing it publicly because hitters looked embarrassed on camera. Elijah raised an eyebrow. They banned a pitch. Walter laughed bitterly. No official ban. Baseball protects itself differently. Quiet pressure, private warnings, threatened contracts. Thunder rolled somewhere above Chicago. Walter stepped closer. Listen carefully, he said. You cannot throw the Phantom casually. Timing matters more than speed. The hitter must believe fastball completely before everything disappears underneath him. Elijah nodded slowly. For the next 12 days, training became brutal. Walter isolated Elijah from cameras entirely. Security surrounded the batting cage after reporters attempted climbing fences for footage. Victoria hired private guards, while media helicopters circled constantly overhead. Inside the cage, Elijah trained until his shoulder burned numb. Morning drills focused on velocity. Afternoons emphasized control. Night sessions belonged exclusively to the Phantom. Again, again, again. Walter corrected every movement relentlessly. Lower release point. Hide your wrist longer. Trust gravity. Elijah's fingers split open repeatedly from unusual seam pressure. Blood-stained baseball leather, dark red some evenings. His mother wrapped fresh bandages nightly without complaint. Still, fear haunted her constantly. One evening after midnight, she found Walter sitting alone outside the cage, smoking silently beneath flickering streetlights. "You're pushing him too hard," she whispered. Walter stared toward empty railroad tracks. "Because Marcus Holloway still swings like a professional athlete," he answered. "People online think this story already ended. They're wrong." She sat beside him quietly. "Daniel loved baseball more than life itself," she admitted softly. "And baseball buried him anyway." Walter nodded slowly. "That's exactly why Elijah must win publicly," he replied. "America ignores quiet truths. It only remembers spectacle." Meanwhile, Marcus Holloway trained obsessively inside a private facility outside Chicago. Sports psychologists, professional batting coaches, nutrition specialists, everything money could purchase. Yet frustration followed him everywhere now. Every television replayed Elijah's fastball endlessly. Social media mocked Marcus constantly. Former players quietly questioned whether age finally weakened him. His son, 16-year-old Brandon Holloway, avoided conversations completely. One night after training, Brandon finally spoke. "What if the kid's actually better than everyone thinks?" Marcus slammed his locker shut violently. "He's 12, Marcus snapped, but his voice carried uncertainty now. 3 nights before the exhibition, Victoria Sterling organized a massive press conference downtown. Reporters packed the ballroom shoulder to shoulder beneath brilliant white lights. Elijah entered quietly beside Walter, wearing a simple dark suit borrowed from a neighbor. Questions exploded immediately. "Are you nervous? Why challenge Marcus Holloway publicly? What happens if you lose?" Elijah answered none initially. Then one reporter asked softly, "Why baseball?" Elijah looked directly into dozens of cameras. "Because my father never got his final pitch," he said calmly. The ballroom fell silent. Then Elijah reached inside his jacket slowly and placed Daniel Carter's old professional scouting report on the table. Signed personally, Marcus Holloway. The cameras captured everything. The signed scouting report detonated across America within minutes. Every major sports network interrupted regular programming. Analysts who defended Marcus Holloway suddenly sounded cautious, while reporters dissected the document frame by frame. Daniel Carter. Elite velocity, exceptional control, future professional ace. Signed beneath those words sat Marcus Holloway's unmistakable signature from 20 years earlier. Inside luxury restaurants downtown, wealthy executives quietly cancelled dinner reservations to avoid cameras. Former baseball officials refused interview requests entirely. The story no longer concerned only a challenge. Now it threatened reputations. Marcus watched the press conference replay alone inside his office long after midnight. Chicago's skyline reflected coldly against dark windows while thunder rolled across Lake Michigan. He poured another drink with unsteady hands. For the first time in decades, guilt began moving beneath his confidence like something alive. He remembered Daniel standing inside locker rooms demanding equal treatment publicly while other players stayed silent. Marcus remembered hearing executives call Daniel difficult, disruptive, dangerous. Marcus remembered saying nothing. That silence built his empire. Across the city, Elijah continued training relentlessly. Walter increased intensity daily now. The exhibition sat only 48 hours away. Every mistake mattered. Inside the cage, Elijah fired fastballs until the air cracked sharply around each throw. Sweat soaked through his gray shirt while old train tracks trembled beside the alley. Walter studied mechanics constantly. "Again," he ordered. Elijah threw. Again. Another strike. Again. The baseball shattered directly through a hanging target. Walter finally nodded slightly. "Good," he muttered. But afterward, when Elijah walked toward water bottles near the fence, Walter's expression darkened unexpectedly. Victoria noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked quietly. Walter lowered his voice. "His velocity keeps climbing," he admitted. "Too fast." Daniel's arm collapsed young because nobody controlled workload properly. Victoria glanced toward Elijah nervously. "Can he handle the pressure physically?" Walter looked away. "I honestly don't know anymore." That night, Elijah's mother found ice packs melting across the kitchen table beside bloody bandages. Fear tightened inside her chest immediately. "Your arm hurts," she whispered. Elijah flexed stiff fingers slowly. "Only after training." She sat beside him carefully. "You don't owe baseball revenge," she said softly. "Your father wouldn't want you destroying yourself trying to fix history." Elijah stared toward Daniel's glove resting nearby. "I'm not fixing history," he answered quietly. "I'm finishing something." Those words sounded too old for a 12-year-old boy. The next morning, Marcus Holloway shocked everyone again. National reporters gathered expecting another polished statement defending his image. Instead, Marcus arrived alone, wearing no designer suit, no championship rings, no expensive smile. He looked tired. A reporter immediately asked whether Daniel Carter deserved better treatment during his career. Marcus paused nearly 10 seconds before answering. "Yes," he admitted finally. Flashbulbs exploded everywhere. Another reporter shouted, "Did you help silence him?" Marcus swallowed hard, then cameras captured something almost nobody expected from Marcus Holloway. Regret. "I helped myself," he answered quietly, "and sometimes that costs other people everything." America replayed those words non-stop all day, but late that evening, while Elijah practiced alone beneath flickering cage lights, Walter revealed one final secret. Daniel Carter never lost control of the phantom pitch. He stopped throwing it intentionally, because the last hitter who faced it suffered a career-ending injury afterward. Walter's confession changed the atmosphere inside the batting cage completely. Cold wind drifted through broken fence panels while distant thunder rolled across Chicago's south side. Elijah stood motionless, holding the baseball tightly as Walter avoided direct eye contact. "What kind of injury?" Elijah asked quietly. Walter rubbed exhausted hands together slowly. "Minor league hitter named Raymond Pike," he answered. "Spring exhibition game in Milwaukee. Daniel threw the phantom late inside. Pike swung early. The ball dropped unexpectedly and shattered his wrist completely. Career ended that afternoon." Elijah looked down toward the strange black seam markings covering the baseball. "Dad blamed himself," he whispered. Walter nodded. After that, Daniel only used the pitch privately during training, said baseball already ruined enough lives without adding another name. Silence settled heavily between them. Victoria Sterling leaned against the cage wall, watching Elijah carefully now. The challenge suddenly carried greater danger than public embarrassment. "Can someone get seriously hurt Saturday?" she asked. Walter hesitated. That hesitation answered everything. The next morning, national media transformed Marcus Holloway's emotional press conference into front-page headlines everywhere. Former teammates appeared publicly supporting Daniel Carter's accusations for the first time in decades. Retired coaches admitted minority athletes often faced impossible standards behind closed doors. America argued fiercely again. Some praised Marcus for acknowledging painful truths. Others condemned him for waiting until public humiliation forced honesty. Meanwhile, ticket prices for the exhibition skyrocketed across resale websites. Celebrities planned attending, politicians requested luxury suites. Sports historians called the event larger than baseball itself. Inside Holloway Elite Academy, Marcus trained harder than ever. But something fundamental changed now. Fear entered the room, his batting coach noticed immediately. "You're thinking too much," the coach warned. Marcus slammed another missed pitch into protective netting violently. "That kid throws like Daniel," Marcus muttered. The coach frowned. "Impossible." Marcus didn't answer, because deep down he knew impossible things existed. Late Friday evening, Elijah visited Lake Michigan alone, carrying his father's glove beneath his jacket. Fog drifted heavily across dark water while city lights shimmered faintly through cold mist. His mother eventually found him sitting silently beside concrete barriers near the shoreline. For several minutes, neither spoke. Then she sat beside him carefully. "Your father came here before every important game," she said softly. Elijah stared toward black water, crashing gently against rocks. "Was he afraid?" She smiled sadly. "Terrified. Daniel just learned how to walk forward anyway." Elijah finally looked toward her. "What if I hurt Marcus with the phantom?" His mother remained quiet a while. "Then don't throw it angry," she answered. "Your father's mistake wasn't inventing the pitch. His mistake was carrying too much pain inside every throw." Those words stayed with Elijah through the entire night. Saturday morning arrived cold, despite summer season. Clouds swallowed most sunlight above Chicago, while helicopters circled the massive downtown stadium, broadcasting live coverage nationwide. 15,000 seats sold out completely. Inside a private locker room beneath the stadium, Walter wrapped fresh tape carefully around Elijah's fingers. Victoria Sterling adjusted her jacket nearby, while reporters screamed questions somewhere beyond concrete hallways. Then Walter handed Elijah one final envelope. "Your father wrote this 3 weeks before he died," Walter said quietly. Elijah opened it slowly. Inside rested a single handwritten sentence. "Sometimes the world only listens after you make legends look ordinary." The stadium looked enormous from field level. Bright white lights cut through grey afternoon clouds, while national television cameras rolled continuously beside crowded dugouts. 15,000 spectators filled every seat inside the downtown arena, creating a restless ocean of noise vibrating through concrete walls. Elijah stepped slowly from the tunnel, carrying Daniel Carter's glove against his chest. The roar shifted immediately. Some people cheered loudly, others simply stared. Millions more watched live from televisions across America. Commentators spoke rapidly about history, race, redemption, and impossible odds, while Elijah walked calmly toward the pitching mound, wearing plain black cleats and a simple gray jersey, with Carter stitched across the back. No sponsorship logos, no flashy introductions, only silence surrounding him like armor. Walter followed several steps behind, carrying the old notebook beneath one arm. His knees ached terribly now, but adrenaline kept him moving. Victoria Sterling watched from a luxury suite high above home plate, beside major executives suddenly desperate to appear supportive publicly. Meanwhile, Marcus Holloway emerged from the opposite tunnel wearing a pristine white uniform customized specifically for the event. The crowd erupted automatically from years of conditioned admiration, yet something felt different now. The applause carried uncertainty. Marcus tipped his helmet politely before stepping into the batter's box. His movements remained sharp despite age, but tension tightened visibly through his shoulders. Then stadium screens suddenly went black. The crowd quieted instantly. A documentary video began playing across massive jumbotrons overhead. Chicago neighborhoods, old newspaper clippings, Daniel Carter striking out hitters during forgotten minor league games, interviews with former teammates describing racism hidden beneath baseball's polished image. Then came footage nobody expected. Young Marcus Holloway standing beside Daniel after a championship victory 20 years earlier, laughing together, celebrating together. Friends. The stadium reacted audibly. Marcus looked upward toward the screens with visible shock. He clearly never approved that footage publicly. The documentary ended with Daniel's final recorded interview shortly before his death. Tired eyes, weak smile, hospital bracelet visible beneath his sleeve. One day, Daniel said softly through old speakers, "My son will finish the inning they stopped me from pitching." Absolute silence swallowed the stadium afterward. Even commentators stopped speaking. Cameras found Elijah standing motionless near the mound, gripping the glove tightly against his heart. His mother cried openly behind home plate. Marcus lowered his head briefly inside the batter's box. For the first time all afternoon, he looked genuinely ashamed. The home plate umpire finally stepped forward. "Exhibition begins now," he announced. The scoreboard displayed giant white numbers. 3 pitches. Walter met Elijah's eyes from behind protective netting. One slow nod. Elijah inhaled deeply. Then he climbed the mound. Millions watched him adjust Daniel Carter's glove carefully beneath cold stadium lights. Marcus settled into his batting stance 60 feet away. The crowd became completely silent. Elijah remembered his father's handwritten sentence again. "Make legends look ordinary." He began his wind-up smoothly. Marcus tracked the motion carefully. Fastball. Everything about Elijah's body screamed fastball. Marcus swung with full professional instinct. The baseball exploded across the strike zone untouched. Crack. The catcher barely secured it cleanly. The radar flashed instantly overhead. 74 mph. The stadium gasped as one enormous living organism. Marcus stared toward the mound frozen, because he recognized that pitch completely. Daniel Carter's mechanics, Daniel Carter's release, Daniel Carter's ghost standing alive beneath stadium lights. Marcus Holloway stepped away from home plate slowly after the first pitch. The stadium remained stunned. Commentators struggled finding words, while slow-motion replays showed Elijah's fastball slicing violently across the strike zone before Marcus completed his swing. Millions watching nationwide witnessed something terrifying. The 12-year-old kid was not nervous. Marcus rolled tension from his shoulders while gripping the bat tighter now. Sweat darkened his gloves despite cool afternoon air. Because he remembered Daniel Carter perfectly after that first pitch. Same release point, same explosive arm speed, same impossible calm. 20 years disappeared instantly inside Marcus's mind. Back then, Daniel terrified veteran hitters during closed training sessions before executives quietly buried his career beneath politics and silence. Now Daniel's son stood on the mound carrying unfinished business. Behind protective netting, Walter Dawson watched Marcus carefully. "He's rattled," Victoria Sterling whispered beside him. Walter shook his head slowly. "No," he answered, "he's remembering." Elijah received the baseball back from the catcher without expression. Stadium noise faded around him again until only breathing mattered. Walter's voice echoed through memory. First pitch establishes truth. Second pitch destroys trust. Elijah adjusted his grip carefully. Marcus stepped back into the batter's box, determined now. His pride refused another embarrassing miss publicly. Millions already questioned his greatness. He could not survive humiliation twice. The umpire pointed forward. Pitch 2. Elijah wound up identically. Same shoulders, same arm slot, same violent release. Marcus recognized fastball immediately and reacted sooner this time, exactly as Walter predicted. But halfway toward home plate, the baseball shifted sharply sideways. Cut fastball. Marcus's bat carved through empty air again. The baseball snapped against the catcher's mitt, barely inches outside the sweet spot. Strike 2. The stadium exploded. Thousands jumped from their seats, screaming, while sports commentators shouted over each other in disbelief. Replay screens magnified the miss repeatedly from every angle. Marcus remained frozen after the swing. His heartbeat thundered painfully now. That pitch moved exactly like Daniel Carter's devastating cutter from decades earlier. Marcus remembered striking out against it privately during off-season workouts before Daniel's career collapsed. Fear finally entered his eyes. Across America, viewers noticed immediately. Elijah stood quietly atop the mound while cameras zoomed closer toward his face. No celebration, no arrogance, only focus. His mother clasped both hands tightly together behind home plate, fighting tears. Walter closed his eyes briefly. One pitch remained. The phantom. Marcus stepped away from the batter's box, breathing heavily now. The stadium noise blurred around him while memories surfaced violently. Daniel laughing beside locker rooms. Daniel arguing with executives. Daniel promising baseball would eventually answer for its hypocrisy. Marcus swallowed hard. Then he looked toward Elijah. For one brief second, he no longer saw a child. He saw judgment. High above the stadium, dark clouds gathered heavily across Chicago's skyline. Wind swirled loose dirt across the infield, while giant screens displayed the countdown dramatically. One pitch remaining. Walter gripped the fence so tightly his knuckles turned white. Victoria Sterling whispered softly beside him. "Can Marcus hit the phantom?" Walter stared toward Elijah. Then he answered honestly, "Nobody ever truly has." Elijah positioned his fingers across the seams exactly how Daniel once taught himself during frozen winter practices long ago. And 60 feet away, Marcus Holloway suddenly realized something horrifying. Daniel Carter had known this moment was coming years before he died. The entire stadium stood before the final pitch. Nobody remained seated anymore. 15,000 people leaned forward beneath storm-darkened skies, while millions watched silently from televisions across America. Even sports commentators stopped pretending neutrality now. Something larger than baseball filled the stadium. Marcus Holloway stepped back into the batter's box slowly. His confidence disappeared completely. Years earlier, he faced legendary pitchers throwing impossible heat inside packed World Series stadiums. He survived hostile crowds, championship pressure, and national scrutiny. Yet nothing ever felt like this. Because this was not simply competition anymore. This felt personal. Elijah stood motionless atop the mound, gripping the baseball carefully inside Daniel Carter's glove. Wind pulled against his jersey, while thunder rumbled above downtown skyscrapers. Walter's final warning echoed inside his memory. Never throw the phantom angry. Elijah inhaled deeply. Then everything slowed. The crowd vanished. The noise vanished. Only home plate remained. Marcus studied Elijah's grip, desperately searching for clues. Professional instinct screamed warnings through every nerve now. Something unusual rested inside the boy's hand. Something dangerous. The umpire raised one arm. Final pitch. Elijah began his wind-up. Smooth, balanced, perfectly identical to the first two deliveries. Marcus recognized fastball immediately. Mid-height, straight trajectory, attack now. His body committed automatically. Professional muscle memory exploded through hips and shoulders with violent precision developed across decades. Then the baseball disappeared. Not sideways. Downward, violently downward. The phantom dropped beneath Marcus's swing like gravity suddenly doubled halfway toward home plate. His bat sliced through empty space 18 inches above the ball. The catcher secured it near his knees. Strike three. Absolute silence swallowed the stadium for one impossible second. Then chaos erupted everywhere. The roar felt physical. People screamed, cried, grabbed strangers beside them. Commentators shouted incoherently, while replay screens showed the phantom dropping unnaturally again and again from impossible camera angles. Marcus remained frozen after the swing, bat hanging uselessly beside him. Eyes wide, broken, because he finally understood the truth. Daniel Carter had never disappeared. Baseball buried him publicly, but pieces survived inside everyone he touched. Inside Walter, inside old photographs, inside unfinished anger, and now inside Elijah. Elijah lowered his arm slowly while stadium lights reflected across rain beginning to fall lightly from dark clouds overhead. His mother collapsed into tears behind home plate. Victoria Sterling covered her mouth, trembling visibly. Walter Dawson gripped the fence, crying openly without shame. For 20 years, guilt haunted him for failing Daniel. Now something finally loosened inside his chest. Marcus removed his helmet carefully. Then he walked slowly toward the mound while cameras followed every step live nationwide. The stadium quieted gradually. Nobody knew what would happen next. Marcus stopped directly before Elijah. Rain dripped softly from both their shoulders. For several long seconds, neither spoke. Then Marcus extended his hand. His voice cracked slightly. "Your father was the greatest pitcher I ever saw," he admitted quietly. Elijah stared into his eyes calmly. "Then why did you stay silent when they destroyed him?" he asked. The question hit harder than any pitch thrown all afternoon. Marcus looked downward immediately. And millions watching across America waited breathlessly for his answer. Rain continued falling softly across the stadium, while Marcus Holloway stood frozen before Elijah beneath brilliant white lights. Millions watched live. Nobody moved. Marcus swallowed hard as cameras captured every emotion crossing his face. Pride fought guilt visibly behind his eyes, while thunder echoed beyond downtown Chicago. Elijah never looked away. "Why stay silent?" he repeated quietly. Marcus exhaled slowly. "Because silence was profitable," he admitted. The stadium reacted immediately. Murmurs spread through thousands of spectators, while commentators fell speechless again. Marcus Holloway built his empire carefully around confidence and control. Now he stood publicly dismantling himself sentence by sentence. Rain darkened his uniform while he continued. Daniel terrified executives because he told uncomfortable truths openly, Marcus confessed. And I cared more about protecting my future than protecting my friend. That word landed heavily. Elijah's jaw tightened. For years, Daniel Carter existed only as whispers and grief inside small apartments and forgotten neighborhoods. Now America suddenly heard powerful men speak his name honestly. Marcus removed one batting glove slowly. I convinced myself staying quiet wasn't betrayal, he said bitterly, but silence always chooses a side eventually. Walter Dawson lowered his head behind protective fencing. Victoria Sterling watched Marcus carefully now. She expected excuses, corporate language, carefully rehearsed apologies. Instead, Marcus sounded exhausted, finally honest. Elijah glanced briefly toward the old glove resting against his chest. Then he asked one final question. Did my father know you stayed silent? Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Yes, he whispered. The answer cut through the stadium harder than shouting. Because suddenly everyone understood. Daniel Carter died carrying betrayal alongside disappointment. Marcus looked back toward Elijah. Your father visited me 3 weeks before he died, Marcus admitted quietly. He asked whether I would finally speak publicly beside him. Rain intensified overhead. Nobody inside the stadium even noticed anymore. I said no, Marcus continued. Elijah's mother covered her face, crying openly. Marcus stared toward the dirt beneath his feet. Daniel told me something before leaving, he said softly. He said eventually baseball would hear his voice anyway. I thought grief made him dramatic. Marcus looked directly at Elijah then. Turns out he was right. The crowd erupted suddenly into applause, not celebration, recognition. Thousands understood they were witnessing something rare, truth without protection. High above home plate, giant stadium screens replayed the phantom pitch endlessly, while social media exploded worldwide. Professional athletes posted reactions immediately. Civil rights leaders praised Elijah publicly. Former baseball executives began resigning quietly before investigations even started. The sport itself trembled. Then Marcus Holloway shocked everyone again. He reached inside his jacket slowly and removed a folded document protected carefully inside plastic. Daniel Carter's final contract offer. Unsigned. Marcus handed it toward Elijah. Your father never saw this, Marcus admitted. Executives killed the deal before he could respond. Elijah unfolded the paper carefully. 8-year professional contract. Guaranteed millions. Enough money to change generations permanently. Denied, buried, stolen. Elijah's hands trembled slightly for the first time all afternoon. Then Marcus said something nobody expected. I'm resigning from Holloway Elite tonight, he announced publicly. The stadium gasped. Marcus looked toward cameras surrounding the field, and tomorrow morning I'm giving federal investigators every private document I protected for 20 years. America woke up furious the next morning. Marcus Holloway's public confession dominated every major news network before sunrise. Sports journalists abandoned normal programming entirely, while legal analysts debated potential investigations connected to Daniel Carter's buried contract. By noon, congressional representatives publicly demanded transparency from professional baseball organizations regarding racial discrimination allegations spanning decades. The story exploded beyond sports completely. Outside Holloway Elite Academy, protesters gathered carrying signs demanding equal opportunity programs for underserved neighborhoods. Television crews flooded Chicago streets, interviewing former athletes, finally willing to describe corruption hidden beneath baseball's polished image. And at the center of everything stood Elijah Carter, 12 years old, quiet, overwhelmed. Inside Victoria Sterling's downtown office, advisors crowded around giant television screens, tracking public reaction in real time. Stock prices connected to Marcus Holloway's business partnerships dropped sharply overnight. Sponsors canceled contracts publicly. Corporate boards distanced themselves immediately. Victoria remained calm throughout the chaos. This was never only about baseball, she said quietly. Walter Dawson sat nearby holding coffee with trembling hands. Daniel knew that years ago, he answered. Meanwhile, Elijah stayed hidden inside the South Side apartment with his mother, while helicopters circled constantly overhead. Reporters camped outside the building 24 hours daily now. The world suddenly wanted pieces of their pain. His mother watched television silently while Elijah cleaned Daniel's glove carefully beside the kitchen table. Every channel replayed the phantom pitch, again, again, again. Finally, she muted everything. "You changed something yesterday," she whispered. Elijah shrugged slightly. "Maybe." She looked toward him carefully. "Your father spent years screaming alone," she said softly. "You made people finally listen in 45 seconds." That truth frightened her almost as much as it inspired her. Around sunset, federal investigators officially announced inquiries into historical contract suppression and discriminatory recruitment practices connected to several former baseball executives. One name surfaced repeatedly: Charles Whitmore, former league vice president. Powerful, untouchable, and according to leaked internal documents, directly responsible for blocking Daniel Carter's professional contract 20 years earlier. Victoria Sterling recognized the danger immediately. Whitmore still controlled enormous political influence despite retirement. Men like him rarely surrendered quietly. Late that evening, Walter returned alone to the old batting cage after security teams advised temporary relocation elsewhere. Rainwater dripped steadily through the rusted roof while neighborhood kids pressed faces against fences, hoping glimpses of television cameras. Walter unlocked the office slowly. Then he stopped. Every file cabinet stood open, drawers emptied, papers scattered across the floor. Someone had searched the cage aggressively. Walter's heartbeat accelerated immediately. He rushed toward the locked cabinet beneath his desk. Broken open, empty. Daniel Carter's remaining private journals were gone. Walter cursed beneath his breath and grabbed his phone instantly. Before dialing, however, he noticed something taped carefully to the office wall. A white business card. No name, only one handwritten sentence. Some ghosts should stay buried. At that exact moment across Chicago, Elijah received a direct message through social media from an anonymous account. 3 words only: "Ask Walter everything." Attached beneath the message sat an old photograph Elijah had never seen before. Daniel Carter standing beside Charles Whitmore. And both men were smiling. Elijah stared at the photograph for nearly a full minute without blinking. Daniel Carter and Charles Whitmore stood together inside an expensive restaurant wearing suits and smiling directly toward the camera. No anger, no tension, friends, or at least pretending convincingly. The image shattered everything Elijah believed about his father's story. His mother studied the photograph beside him at the kitchen table while helicopters continued circling above the apartment building. "I've never seen this before," she whispered. Elijah immediately grabbed his jacket. "I'm going to Walter's." "Absolutely not," she snapped quickly. "Reporters are everywhere." Then Walter called. One sentence: someone broke into the cage. 20 minutes later, Victoria Sterling's security team escorted Elijah and his mother through crowded South Side streets beneath heavy rain. News vans blocked intersections while strangers shouted support from sidewalks. Inside the batting cage office, destruction covered everything. Cabinets emptied, folders ripped apart, Daniel Carter's journals missing completely. Walter looked furious. And guilty. Elijah placed the photograph silently across the desk. Walter's expression changed immediately. The old man sat down slowly. "Where did you get this?" "Anonymous message," Elijah answered. "Who was Charles Whitmore to my father, really?" Rain hammered the roof harder. Walter rubbed both hands across his face before finally speaking. "Whitmore recruited Daniel personally out of high school," he admitted quietly. "Promised him everything: scholarships, professional development, protection." Elijah frowned. Protection from what? Walter hesitated too long. That hesitation said enough. Victoria Sterling crossed her arms sharply. "Walter," she warned. The old man exhaled heavily. Daniel knew baseball discriminated against black players before signing anything, Walter confessed. Whitmore convinced him change could happen internally if talented athletes cooperated quietly. Elijah's mother stared in disbelief. "You told me Daniel fought them immediately," she whispered. Walter nodded sadly. "Because eventually he did, but first, Daniel trusted Whitmore completely." The room fell silent. Years of grief suddenly became more complicated. Walter continued carefully. Whitmore treated Daniel almost like family initially. Expensive dinners, private coaching, career promises. That photograph came from those years before everything collapsed. Elijah studied Daniel's smile closely. He looked hopeful, young, alive. What changed? Elijah asked softly. Walter's jaw tightened. Daniel discovered Whitmore secretly blocked minority players from certain endorsement deals while publicly pretending equality existed. When Daniel confronted him privately, Whitmore offered money for silence. Victoria muttered bitterly, "Classic corporate strategy." Walter nodded. Daniel refused. Afterward, Whitmore destroyed him systematically. Elijah gripped the photograph tighter. Then why steal the journals now? Nobody answered immediately, because everyone already understood. Those journals probably contained names, evidence, secrets powerful men spent decades hiding. Suddenly, Victoria's phone buzzed sharply. She checked the screen once before her expression darkened. "Whitmore just scheduled a live television interview tonight," she announced quietly. Walter cursed under his breath. "He's moving first," Victoria continued. Elijah looked toward her carefully. "Meaning?" Victoria locked eyes with him. "Meaning powerful people only speak publicly when they're preparing to bury someone permanently." Then her phone buzzed again. Another message. This one from Marcus Holloway. 4 urgent words. Whitmore knows about Elijah. By 8 o'clock that night, America stopped watching sports entirely. Every major television network carried Charles Whitmore's interview live. The former baseball executive sat beneath soft studio lighting, wearing an expensive navy suit, and the practiced smile of a man who survived scandals before. Grey hair, calm posture, controlled breathing. A professional liar prepared carefully. Inside Victoria Sterling's penthouse office, Elijah watched silently beside Walter and his mother, while rain battered enormous glass windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Marcus Holloway arrived 10 minutes earlier without security or cameras. Nobody welcomed him warmly. Walter barely acknowledged his presence. Whitmore adjusted his tie on screen while reporters introduced him as a respected architect of modern baseball development programs. Elijah nearly laughed hearing that description. Then the interview began. "Mr. Whitmore," the anchor asked carefully, "did racial discrimination influence Daniel Carter's failed professional career?" Whitmore sighed heavily. "Daniel was extraordinarily talented," he answered smoothly, "but talent alone cannot overcome emotional instability." Marcus muttered a curse immediately. Whitmore continued calmly. "Many young athletes struggle handling pressure. Daniel became increasingly paranoid late in his career. He accused colleagues unfairly and isolated himself professionally." Elijah's mother stood instantly. "Liar," she whispered. Whitmore lowered his eyes sadly for dramatic effect. "Frankly," he added quietly, "watching his son exploited publicly these past weeks has been heartbreaking." Victoria Sterling switched off the television immediately. "There it is," she said coldly. "Character assassination. Predictable." Marcus paced angrily across the room now. "Whitmore knows those journals exist somewhere," he muttered. "He's trying poisoning public opinion before evidence surfaces." Elijah looked toward him sharply. "You sound scared of him." Marcus stopped pacing. Then he answered honestly. "Because I spent 20 years watching powerful men disappear careers overnight." Silence followed. Finally, Walter stood slowly from his chair. "There's something else Daniel told me before dying," he admitted quietly. Everyone turned toward him immediately. Walter's expression looked haunted. "Whitmore didn't only destroy contracts," he continued. "He collected leverage against athletes. Affairs, addiction problems, financial desperation. Anything useful." Victoria frowned. "Blackmail?" Walter nodded once. "Daniel discovered evidence proving several executives manipulated player opportunities using private surveillance and illegal payments." Marcus looked stunned. "Why never tell investigators earlier?" Walter stared toward the rain outside. "Because Daniel hid the evidence before dying," he answered softly. "And only one person knew where." Everyone slowly looked toward Marcus Holloway. Marcus froze, his face drained completely. No, he whispered. Walter stepped closer. Daniel trusted you once before everything collapsed, Walter said quietly. You were supposed to protect something if anything happened to him. Marcus backed away slowly. I thought he destroyed those files years ago, he muttered. Victoria crossed her arms sharply. What files? Marcus looked directly toward Elijah finally. Shame filled his eyes completely now. Daniel gave me a storage key 3 weeks before he died, Marcus admitted. Safety deposit box downtown. He said if baseball ever attacked his son someday, the truth inside would matter. The room went silent. Elijah stared at Marcus without blinking. And you forgot about it for 20 years? Marcus swallowed hard. No, he whispered painfully. I was too ashamed to open it. Then Victoria's security alarms suddenly activated downstairs. Someone was entering the building unauthorized. Victoria Sterling's penthouse security alarms screamed through the building like air raid sirens. Everyone inside the office froze instantly. Rain lashed violently against the windows, while red emergency lights flashed across polished marble floors. Victoria's private security team spoke urgently through hidden earpieces near the elevators. Unauthorized access on level 47, one guard announced sharply. Marcus Holloway's face turned pale. Whitmore found us faster than expected, he muttered. Elijah stood immediately beside his mother, while Walter grabbed an old aluminum bat leaning near the office wall. Victoria pressed several buttons beneath her desk calmly. Steel security doors began sliding shut automatically throughout the penthouse. Nobody panics, she ordered. Downstairs, shouting echoed faintly through elevator shafts. Then came the sound of breaking glass. Marcus cursed under his breath. Those aren't reporters, he warned. Walter looked toward him sharply. How do you know? Marcus met his eyes grimly. Because Whitmore used private security contractors during labor disputes years ago. Men without badges, men who solve problems quietly. Elijah's mother grabbed her son protectively. We should call police immediately. Victoria shook her head. Already did, but downtown response times tonight are compromised. Half Chicago's emergency units are controlling protests outside Whitmore's interview studio. Thunder rattled the entire building. Another violent crash echoed downstairs. Walter stepped beside Elijah quickly. Listen carefully, he whispered urgently. If anything happens, you protect your father's glove first, understand? Elijah frowned. The glove? Walter nodded intensely. Daniel stitched something inside the lining before he died. Marcus stared at him in shock. You knew? Walter looked furious suddenly. I suspected. Daniel trusted objects more than people near the end. Victoria's head of security rushed into the office, breathing heavily. 3 men bypassed lobby checkpoints, he reported. Professional movement, military backgrounds probably. Marcus immediately walked toward Elijah. The safety deposit box matters less now, he said quickly. Whitmore thinks Daniel hid evidence somewhere else. Elijah slowly looked down toward the old glove resting beside him. Understanding hit everyone simultaneously. The glove, all these years. Walter grabbed a pocket knife carefully. Sorry, Daniel, he whispered. Then he sliced open part of the inner leather lining. Inside rested something wrapped tightly beneath faded stitching. A tiny cassette tape. Nobody spoke. Victoria stared in disbelief. Please tell me that isn't exactly what I think it is. Marcus looked sick. Daniel recorded meetings constantly after Whitmore betrayed him, he admitted softly. Another loud crash shook the penthouse doors. Security guards shouted downstairs. Victoria immediately handed the cassette toward Elijah. Take this and move, she ordered. Hidden bookshelves beside the office suddenly slid sideways, revealing a narrow private staircase descending through darkness. Walter grabbed Elijah's shoulder firmly. Go now. Elijah hesitated. What about everyone else? Marcus Holloway stepped toward the office entrance slowly. For the first time in decades, he looked absolutely certain about something. Whitmore spent 20 years teaching men like me how cowardice works, Marcus said quietly. Tonight he learns what happens when somebody finally refuses it. Then he locked the office doors behind himself and walked directly toward the approaching intruders. Seconds later, the first gunshot echoed through the penthouse. The gunshot cracked through Victoria Sterling's penthouse like lightning splitting stone. Elijah's mother screamed instinctively while Walter shoved them both toward the hidden staircase, descending beneath the office. Emergency lights painted the narrow concrete walls red as chaos erupted upstairs. Another gunshot echoed, then shouting. Marcus Holloway's voice thundered furiously somewhere beyond the locked office doors. "Get them out!" Walter slammed the hidden entrance shut behind them immediately. Darkness swallowed everything except dim emergency strips glowing faintly along the staircase floor. Elijah clutched the cassette tape tightly inside Daniel Carter's glove while footsteps pounded above. His heart hammered painfully now. For the first time since challenging Marcus publicly, fear finally reached him. Real fear, the kind carrying guns. The staircase descended nearly 6 floors beneath the building before opening into a private underground parking structure filled with black luxury vehicles. Victoria's security guards waited beside armored SUVs, holding weapons openly. "Move," one shouted urgently. Walter pushed Elijah and his mother into the nearest vehicle while rainwater flooded across concrete nearby from drainage tunnels. Behind them, another distant gunshot echoed overhead. Elijah grabbed Walter's arm desperately. "Marcus is still upstairs." Walter's expression hardened painfully. "Marcus made his choice," he answered. The convoy exploded from the underground garage. Seconds later, tires screaming across wet pavement while police sirens approached from distant streets. Chicago looked surreal beneath storm clouds and flashing emergency lights. Protest crowds still surrounded downtown intersections, chanting Daniel Carter's name while helicopters flooded the sky overhead. Inside the speeding SUV, Victoria Sterling finally inserted the cassette tape into an old portable recorder retrieved from emergency equipment. Everyone listened breathlessly. Static crackled first, then voices. Daniel Carter, Charles Whitmore, clear, undeniable. Whitmore's voice sounded younger but unmistakable. "Take the money, Daniel," he said calmly through the recording. "Nobody cares about fairness enough to sacrifice millions for it." Daniel answered immediately. "Kids coming after me deserve better than silence." Whitmore laughed softly. "Those kids will never reach this level anyway, unless people like me allow it." Elijah's mother covered her mouth, crying quietly. The recording continued. Illegal payments, manipulated scouting reports, destroyed contracts, racial quotas disguised beneath corporate language. Every secret Whitmore spent decades hiding existed now on tape. Victoria looked stunned. "This destroys everything," she whispered. Walter nodded grimly. "That's why Daniel died afraid." Suddenly the driver cursed loudly. Black SUVs appeared behind them, following fast. Victoria's head of security checked mirrors immediately. 3 vehicles, professional pursuit formation. Rain hammered harder while traffic scattered ahead. Elijah looked backward through the rear window, watching headlights close rapidly behind them. One pursuing SUV accelerated aggressively, then sideswiped their vehicle violently. Everyone slammed sideways. Glass shattered. The cassette recorder crashed onto the floor. Another impact followed immediately afterward. Walter grabbed Elijah protectively while drivers fought desperately for control across rain-slick streets. Police sirens grew louder nearby. Then one pursuing SUV pulled beside them, close enough for Elijah seeing the driver clearly beneath flashing streetlights. Charles Whitmore himself sat inside the back seat, watching, smiling, and slowly raising a handgun toward their window. Time slowed the instant Elijah saw Charles Whitmore raise the handgun. Rain streaked across black SUV windows while downtown Chicago blurred beneath flashing police lights and screaming tires. Whitmore's expression remained perfectly calm. That frightened Elijah more than the weapon itself. The man looked practiced, experienced, like someone who spent decades destroying lives without losing sleep afterward. "Down!" Victoria's security chief shouted. Gunfire exploded across the street. Bullets shattered side windows instantly, while drivers fought desperately through traffic, flooding beneath storm drains. Elijah's mother pulled him against her chest as broken glass sprayed everywhere. Walter grabbed the cassette recorder from the floor just before another impact slammed their SUV sideways into a parked delivery truck. Metal screamed. Airbags exploded violently. For several terrifying seconds, nobody understood whether they crashed or rolled completely. Then silence, except rain and distant sirens. Elijah blinked hard, trying focusing through smoke and shattered glass. Blood trickled down Walter's forehead beside him while Victoria shouted orders into a damaged radio. Outside, one pursuing SUV spun into a traffic barrier after colliding with police cruisers entering the intersection at full speed. The third vehicle vanished down another street immediately. But Whitmore's SUV stopped only yards away, driver door opening. Whitmore stepped into the rain, holding the handgun steadily beneath flashing blue police lights. 80 years old, perfect posture, absolutely unafraid. Officers screamed commands from approaching cruisers. Whitmore ignored them entirely. Instead, he stared directly through Elijah's shattered window. "Your father could have been rich," Whitmore shouted over the storm, but he confused pride with morality. Elijah pushed open the damaged door slowly, despite his mother grabbing desperately for him. Rain soaked him instantly, police weapons aimed everywhere now. Whitmore's hand never trembled. "You think exposing baseball changes America," Whitmore called bitterly. "Systems survive because people secretly prefer comfort over fairness." Elijah stood motionless beneath cold rain, holding Daniel Carter's glove tightly against his chest. Then he answered quietly, "Maybe, but people still deserve the truth anyway." Whitmore studied him silently. For one strange second, sadness crossed the old man's face. Not guilt, recognition, like he suddenly understood history repeating itself directly before him. Then police snipers positioned across nearby rooftops shouted final warnings. Whitmore glanced briefly toward surrounding red laser sights covering his chest. He laughed softly beneath the rain. "Daniel said the exact same thing," he whispered. Then, before anyone could react, Charles Whitmore lowered the handgun slowly onto wet pavement and raised both hands. The entire intersection erupted instantly. Police swarmed forward, reporters sprinted through barricades, helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting everything live nationwide. Elijah remained standing alone in the storm while cameras captured Daniel Carter's glove pressed tightly against his heart. Hours later, federal agents recovered decades of hidden financial records and surveillance files directly connected to Whitmore's organization. Arrest warrants followed immediately afterward. By sunrise, professional baseball faced the largest corruption investigation in modern sports history. But one question still haunted Elijah quietly. Why did Whitmore surrender? The answer arrived the next morning, inside a hospital room, where Marcus Holloway finally regained consciousness after taking a bullet protecting Victoria's office. Weak and pale beneath fluorescent lights, Marcus asked, seeing Elijah, "Did Whitmore say Daniel's final sentence?" Elijah nodded slowly. Marcus closed his eyes. "Then Whitmore surrendered because Daniel already beat him years ago," he whispered. Outside the hospital window, thousands gathered across Chicago streets, carrying signs with Daniel Carter's name, and for the first time in 20 years, nobody looked away anymore. Chicago awakened beneath clear skies for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. Rain finally disappeared overnight, leaving streets washed clean, while sunlight reflected brightly across Lake Michigan and towering downtown windows. News helicopters still circled constantly above the city, but something inside Chicago felt different now. Lighter. Honest. Outside Mercy General Hospital, crowds gathered quietly, holding handmade signs supporting Daniel Carter and Elijah. Former athletes stood beside neighborhood families. Wealthy executives stood beside South Side teenagers. People who normally avoided each other now shared sidewalks together because truth had forced everyone into the same conversation. Inside Marcus Holloway's hospital room, morning light stretched softly across white sheets and silent medical equipment. Marcus looked older suddenly. Smaller. Like guilt removed pieces of him overnight. Elijah sat nearby, holding Daniel's glove across his lap, while Walter and his mother stood quietly near the doorway. Marcus stared toward the glove carefully. "Your father visited me the night before he died," Marcus said softly, "not because he wanted revenge, because he still believed baseball could become better." Walter lowered his head. Marcus continued slowly. "Daniel told me people like Whitmore survive because decent men stay silent, protecting themselves. Then he asked me one question." Elijah listened carefully. Marcus looked directly into his eyes. "When your son grows up someday, what kind of man do you want him learning from?" The room became completely still. Marcus swallowed painfully. I never answered him. Elijah glanced down toward the glove resting inside his hands. Cracked leather, faded stitching. Years of grief carried quietly across generations. But not silence anymore. Later that afternoon, federal investigators publicly announced criminal charges against Charles Whitmore and several former executives connected to decades of discriminatory practices, bribery, and illegal surveillance operations inside professional baseball. The recordings Daniel Carter protected changed everything. Scholarship foundations expanded nationwide afterward. Minority recruitment programs received historic funding. Several forgotten athletes previously blacklisted publicly received apologies and financial restitution. And outside the old batting cage near the railroad tracks, construction crews began building something new. The Daniel Carter Youth Training Center. Walter watched demolition crews remove rusted fencing, with tears quietly running down his face. Victoria Sterling stood beside him, smiling softly. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Walter shook his head slowly. "No," he answered. "Elijah did." 3 months later, Elijah arrived at America's National Baseball Development Academy, carrying only 2 things: a small duffel bag and Daniel Carter's glove. Young athletes stopped training whenever Elijah walked onto practice fields now. Coaches whispered constantly about the phantom pitch. Television crews followed him everywhere. Yet Elijah remained quiet, focused, humble, because he understood something adults often forget. Legends are not built from attention. They are built from pain, survived honestly. One cold morning before sunrise, Elijah stood alone on an empty practice mound while fog drifted gently across fresh-cut grass. He adjusted Daniel's glove carefully beneath pale golden light. Then he threw the phantom. The baseball vanished downward through silent morning air, exactly like his father once taught himself years ago. Somewhere beyond the field, Walter smiled, watching unseen. And somewhere beyond memory itself, Daniel Carter finally finished his inning. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share this video.